All right, another review. Let's go up a bit. All right, another video review, and this is of Faithful and the Fallen, Book 3, Ruin is its name, by John Gwynne. First two books, as I mentioned in the first video, which I combined into one, are like stellar fantasy. And I would say, I think one of them was like 8.5, the other was 8.7, around there. Fast paced, really solid, except for a little bit in the beginning of the first one where it was kind of all just set up, right? So, and I mentioned how it was kind of unavoidable in a lot of places. This was obviously almost no setup, and you're off to the races, right? But this book took me probably twice as long as the others to finish. It usually took between 2 to 3 days for the other ones, the first and second. This took me twice as long, so still for like an 800-page book, like 6 days, almost a week. Is not crazy slow, but it did take longer for some reason because the storylines themselves, where they were, I just didn't enjoy them as much. You had Corbin just running, basically running from that place up in the northwest where the giants were, where the Beloew giants were, and they saw the cauldron turn all those Jahar into Kadoshim, and saw that. They took the axe and they started running towards originally someplace else, but then moved over to Drassel, which was their due for the prophecy final destination, really. And I was like, oh, this feels early. Okay. They don't have the forces to win this, but okay, cool. And there was one fight in there, one big battle, and that was pretty interesting. And then another battle where it wasn't much of a battle. They sidestepped the main battle and got on ships and stole them. Those were definitely highlights of that story, but the rest of it, I wasn't as interested in Corbin or the group's story as I was before. And I feel like we got less of Corbin in this than in the others. We got more of the side character point of views, is what it felt like. My gut feeling. I haven't gone back and looked, but it feels that way. We got less story of Corbin during those times. He was trying to become a leader, was kind of his purpose in this book, where he had to make the tough decisions. So that was good. He had to learn to make those tough decisions, but it's kind of what we got with him. There's not much else. I guess the love interest with Corlin kind of went forward, but not much. And I'm not crazy into the love interest anyways. But then so that was one storyline. Then we had another storyline which was far more interesting, which was the resistance with Camlin, where he was the main point of character, and Donna in the marshlands, and fighting off Rin and Evnis's forces and Morkant's forces, right? Going that kind of marsh resistance life was far more interesting, and we saw Vaughn and Idana, and I just felt like I was more entertained by that storyline more. Yeah, it just felt better. I really liked when we got to the Camlin part. And then we got a lot of Mackin, right? Pit fighter. He now spent the book escorting and bringing the queen of Tenebrae, I think, right? So Nahar's mom. Is his name Nahar? I forget his name. The main baddie who was tricked, but we'll get into him. Escorting her to her people, basically, and we got that, and that was interesting, and there was a love story developing there, but it didn't feel as earned as it could have. It was kind of just like, hey, they spent some time in the woods, and he saved her, and now they're in love, right? And I didn't really care too much about that love story too much, even though that was a big part of the story in this book. So really, 2 out of the 3 of the storylines I was not as interested in as I was as previous books, let's say. So it was a bit slower there, and it was a good read. It was well paced, but it was just not as interesting. Then you had the baddies. You had Evnis, a lot of Evnis as well, especially towards the end. Those were interesting because it was connected to Vaughn and Camlin. You had Nahar, is that his name? Let me see if he's in this on here. Nahar, maybe. I'm gonna call him Nahar. King of Tenebrae baddie, Nathair. Nathair finally understood that he was not fighting for Elion. He's fighting for Azeroth, with Calidus as a Catachem and all of his dudes as a Catachem. And he got it, and I don't know, he turned, and it's good that he turned. He wasn't just like, it broke him down, but he decided to ultimately say screw it and say, yeah, we don't understand the stories from the past. Like, since we don't understand the stories, there are no good and evil. Like, the victors wrote the histories, therefore, like, Azeroth might be on the right in this. I'm going to help him with it. And we kind of got that he only did that just to, in his mind, justify his actions, because he realized all his actions were for really bad causes. All these sacrifices he made, which were for the greater good, where there was no greater good for it to go to, which is not bueno. But he did make the turn. He made the Anakin turn, let's call it, and it was good, but it wasn't as believable, because he is and was willing to make sacrifices for the greater good, but he's justifying it with that. It's not believable that he would make that switch, and to me, it would not be believable to make that switch, because we've seen him in these heart-to-hearts with Brandis, forget his name, being like, hey, I know this is like rough, but it's all for like Elion. I'm the bright star. It's got to happen. As soon as that kind of pillar was taken out from under him, he wasn't like completely immobile, decimated, and broken, and he didn't make that turn to say, I've been deceived. He didn't make that Brandis switch, whatever his name is, right? He kind of just went along with it, and it didn't feel believable to me in that way, but we'll see how the story ends up. I did like Brandis, and I keep saying Brandis, I hope that's his name, Brandis, you know who I'm talking about, and it's believable. And I'm happy he, turned into the, okay, screw these guys, I now realize that you're the enemy. And then he took the giant with him, because they saved his wife and kid, who we all knew that was who it was, who those giants were. So I am looking for this book, Ruin, the penultimate book, and it is the Everything is Ruined book, right? Where everyone loses, basically, by the end. Everyone. No one is sure-footed, and everyone is like broken. So we've got this last book to go from broken to hopefully like winning. So it's a nice place to go to. And we also realized, big spoiler, mentioning how I thought Drassel, they were getting there pretty early and they didn't have the forces for it. Yeah, the prophecy was made up. Elion did not make, or Alcyon, who knows? The good God who's forsaken them, right? He didn't write that. Michael did. He didn't write the prophecy, so they're all in like uncharted territory right now, and that's pretty good. I do like that. They do say like a lot of it has come true, which they didn't know it would come true, and that hints at the God like stepping in a little bit, like the stones bleeding, the sun going dark. But I guess if they knew enough about astronomy, they could have guessed that. Who knows, right? But yeah, Michael is, and all of those Beloew are tricking, what's his name? We're getting to the end of the video. I don't want to go too much longer. I would rate this book, honestly, like an 8. We've dropped down a lot, maybe like a 7.8, 7.9, somewhere in there. Yeah, I'd say let's stick at 8. It's an 8 out of 10. I'm hoping this last book feels better and is a really good send-off to this story and brings a good conclusion. It sort of feels like the 4th book in the Sun Eater series, right? Where everything just feels awful. That was like the ending of this book. But thankfully it wasn't as long as that. But yeah, give it an 8. Weakest of the series so far, and I'm looking forward to the next one. I will start reading that basically today. We'll see how it goes. All right, on to the next book.